As a real estate mortgage brokerage or real estate appraisal professional, you have an obligation to avoid conflicts of interest and to disclose conflicts of interest when they arise in the course of providing services to clients. This obligation is tied to the common law as well as to regulatory requirements. When you're in an agency relationship, for example, when representing a seller in a real estate transaction, you have significant fiduciary duties to your client. These include the duty of undivided loyalty, the duty to act in the best interests of your client at all times, and the duty to avoid all conflicts of interest. What is a conflict of interest, though? For the purposes of the Real Estate Act rules, a conflict of interest means a real or apparent incompatibility between an industry member's interests and the interests of the client or potential client. The best way to avoid conflicts of interest is to understand the circumstances in which they arise. For example, if you are a principal in a transaction that involves a personal deal, you cannot act as a transaction facilitator because it would be impossible for you to act impartially to the other person in the transaction. Similarly, you cannot avoid a conflict of interest when you are providing services and one of your relatives is a principal in the transaction. Such circumstances would likely adversely affect your judgment on behalf of, advice to, or loyalty to the other party in the transaction brokerage relationship. The same principle would apply if a lender hired a real estate appraiser to conduct an appraisal on a property being purchased by a family member of the appraiser. The determination of whether a conflict of interest exists is done objectively, not subjectively. In other words, it does not matter whether you feel there is a conflict of interest or whether you feel you can act impartially. The test is whether a reasonable person would conclude the circumstances are such that your judgment on behalf of, advice to, or loyalty to the client could be adversely affected. To read more about conflicts of interest, review the RECA information bulletins on the RECA website at www.reca.ca.